are these people?
Now, we're going to get to our big fuck Israel segment. Ben, everybody buckle up. This is going to be a little bit. This is from ifamericansknew.org. I don't know if you know this organization. Great website. They pull in, they're kind of like almost like an Indie News Now, just for Israel Palestine news. And
gotcha.
If Americans Now wrote this article, Israel now targets anyone trying to rescue children buried under rubble. Yeah, this is unreal. Hala Arafat died in an unimaginable agony with her husband and 4 children. 14 members of their family, 7 of them children, were killed in the bombing of their home. This is the worst. Anyone who tried to approach them was attacked by drones. And this, again, came out of Haaretz. So this is an Israeli newspaper reporting on this. One eye is closed, the other open. One hand grips the wall that's fallen on her. She's trapped in the ruins, her head and body held tightly. She's been like that all night. A light bulb is thrown next to her and she tries to grab it. Maybe it'll save her. She loses her grip on that. And then she raises her hand, a sign that she's alive, and she fights to say the words, "Save me, I'm tired, I cannot." With her last strength, she says, "Please, please save me." And these are her last words.
Yeah, I did see this. It's fucking pretty brutal.
I can't. I mean, yeah. You can see that there's a video here. So.
The picture's alone enough. You know?
It's not clear how long she lived after this picture. On July 15th, Nir Hassan wrote on X, "This woman is called Hala Arafat. She's 35. Since 2 a.m., she and 14 other members of her family, mostly children, have been beneath the rubble of their Zarqa Street house in the Al Tufa neighborhood." He spoke with the brother-in-law, who said that anyone who tried to approach her was attacked by drones. If anyone has an idea how to help, this is the time. The IDF spokesperson's office didn't bother to respond to Hassan for 12 hours. What's the hurry? Later, the spokesperson mumbled something about lack of coordinates. She died in unimaginable agony with her husband and 4 children. 14 members of their family, 7 of their children, 7 children were killed in the bombing of their home. Why? Again, why? This isn't the only family that was slaughtered on Tuesday. The Azam family, Amir, Rateb, Karim, and 4 more babies were also destroyed. The images of the 4 infants' deaths lying on their backs in white shrouds with their faces exposed are among the most difficult. One of the infants' faces is cut. All right, so this is really, again, if Americans knew, they're talking about the Gaza Health Foundation. According to reports, the IDF shot anyone who approached. Daring women soldiers were at the joystick. Or were they soldiers playing their game of death against anyone who tried to attempt a rescue? These are the same IDF soldiers with whom Israel continues to embrace as if they're victims of this war and its heroes. Like the woman who was driving a bulldozer, was bulldozing a house and had the house fall on her bulldozer and died, and they wanted to eulogize her. She was bulldozing somebody's fucking house. They are neither victims nor heroes when they shoot with UAVs at the helpless. They're like shooters near the humanitarian aid hubs. Awful.
Who have been Americans, by the way. A lot of that. So...
This is the same IDF that's known for sending rescue teams to save civilians all over the world, whether they're in Japan or Thailand, Brazil, or Turkey. The IDF no longer rescues anyone. Now it shoots anyone who tries to rescue a woman trapped between the walls of her home. Is there anything more monstrous than that? So that's this one. That's again, Gideon Levy. Haaretz. I got take something to drink here. We've also got this one, Mondoweiss, again, Indie Media Award honoree, initial class 2022. Headlines are just fucking awful. Again, and nobody's doing anything to stop this. In the latest massacre, 15 Palestinians seeking food at the Gaza Health Foundation, which is a joke, a GHF site, die from suffocation after Israeli forces fired gas at aid seekers. Gas. They didn't fire guns, they fired gas. 15 suffocated to death. This wasn't aid distribution. Who witnessed this?
Disturbing universe.
Yeah, it was a real massacre committed against the hungry who came hoping to get some food. At Nasser Hospital,
And people are literally starving in line at these. It's fucking awful.
Yep.
You know?
At
On
Nasser
top of the
Hospital
red light, green light stuff.
in Khan Yunis,
Oh,
young men carried bodies, and hungry children cried out in front of corpses wrapped in white shrouds laying on the ground, bidding them farewell for the last time. All these victims fell at a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation Center, which claims to distribute aid to the hungry. Quote, we received a call that there were a large number of martyrs and injuries at the aid distribution center in Rafah, explained Gideon Abu Safiya, a civil defense paramedic who headed to the incident scene in Rafah in the morning. He continued that when our teams arrived at the location, more than 20 martyrs and dozens of injuries were recorded by civil defense and Red Crescent teams there. But unlike any previous aid massacres where Palestinian aid seekers have been shot by bullets, the Palestinians killed today faced a new threat: poisonous gas. Abu Safiya explained that all the cases were lifted into ambulances were proven to be eyewitnesses to cases of suffocation from poisonous gases, as their bodies were free from wounds or blood. He said that the apparent cause of death were a combination of toxic fumes and trampling in the stampedes that followed in the chaos. Still, he couldn't determine the cause of death officially and was waiting for the official report from the Ministry of Health to announce the exact causes. And we know that they don't really have the equipment or the supplies to really properly test anything at this point.
anything.
That confirmation arrived hours
Can
later.
you imagine getting a toxicology report? Would be nuts.
The Ministry of Health issued a statement saying that 21 citizens had been martyred, including 15 who died by suffocation due to gas being fired at the crowds and the stampede that followed at the American-run aid distribution center. Again, American-run aid distribution center by private mercenaries. We reported that it was going to happen and that it was happening, and now they're murdering everyone there. Yeah, look at this. It's the first time that
I know
suffocation...
some of you are nurses and doctors in the chat. Does that look like a normal facility in any capacity? Like, no. You know?
It's the first time that suffocation and stampede deaths were recorded at these aid distribution centers, quote unquote, even though they really don't distribute aid. They are meant to gather everybody together so they can murder more people.
Yeah.
The ministry also said in its statement that the Israeli occupation and the American organization are deliberately committing systematic massacres against the starving. Yep. In a testimony collected by Mondoweiss from one of the survivors at the scene, Ahmed Abu Amra recounted, quote, at 4 a.m., people gathered at the entrances of the GHF centers waiting for food distribution. The numbers were huge. At that time, armed American company employees who stood not far from the civilians used loudspeakers to order people to retreat and not enter the site. He continued that when the people arrived, and with the repeated calls by the American company employees not to cross the fence, everyone stood still, crowded together due to the large numbers. At around 6 a.m., remember, they've been standing there 2 fucking hours, the Israeli army started shooting at the gathered people. He adds that at the same time, while the Israeli army was firing bullets at the people, the American company employees were launching stun grenades directly at the individuals, hitting them in the head, causing many injuries. Then
we know where they learned that from.
Yep. Then the gas bombs began falling amid the crowd, leading to panic and a stampede. People were running in a terrified scene, and anyone who fell to the ground could not stand up as others trampled over them. Abu Amr lost his cousin today in the chaos at the I don't even want to call it the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site. That's fucking disgraceful. This wasn't aid distribution. It was a massacre, a real massacre committed against the hungry who came hoping to get some food. He added that even the American company employees were firing stun guns at our heads. Again, confirmation by multiple people. They launched more than 16 stun grenades directly at the people. I saw them with my own eyes. I was injured by shrapnel from one that exploded near sand and gravel, and the stones flew toward the people. I was hit in the head, but it wasn't serious, but others were directly hit in the head by the grenades. Some lost their eyes. Some had their mouths injured and noses broken. Because we know that there's adequate hospital supplies to patch them back up, right? Abu Amr explains why he and others continue to go to these locations despite the risks. He says, I'm a living example. For 4 days, my 3 children, my wife and I have not eaten anything. 4 days without food. That's why we go for any option that gives us even the small chance of getting food. It's literally fucking Squid Game, the Hunger Games. Red light, green light.
And keep in mind, there's fucking aid miles away, literally being destroyed as we speak by Israelis who feel like they have every right to do that.
And blocking the trucks from coming in. Months worth of aid.
Atrocious.
Abu Amr
literally
explains,
there waiting.
All right, the only solution and alternative to this tragedy and these daily massacres is for all of us, the residents of Gaza, to agree not to go to these sites, but we must insist that aid comes to the doorstep of our tents. We've been displaced, our homes destroyed, and our children killed. And now to get food, we have to face death daily. This is unbearable. We deserve to eat and drink. My children don't deserve to sleep without food for 4 fucking days.
Could you imagine?
No,
I mean,
I can't, because my kids can't go 1 hour without fucking eating. So, and I can't even imagine what the pain of a parent to know that you can't do anything for a child that's crying out for help. The helplessness of that as a parent. Fuck these motherfuckers. But it doesn't stop there. Let's go to another Indie Media Award honoree, Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. This was the next fucking day. Israeli forces kill 93 Palestinians in Gaza over 24 hours. 93 killed, 367 wounded as a result of Israel's genocidal war over the past 24 hours as relentless U.S.-backed Israeli strikes continue. I love that Dave doesn't pull punches there. The health ministry said that another body was recovered from the rubble. A number of victims are still under the rubble and on the streets, where ambulance and civil defense crews are unable to reach them at this time because they keep getting attacked. The ministry recorded a total of 26 aid-related deaths and 32 injuries. The latest violence brings the total number of aid seekers killed since the U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began operating at the end of May to 877, and the number of wounded to 5,666. The UN's been reporting a slightly higher aid death toll than the health ministry, but 800. Where else would 877 people be allowed to be murdered lining up for food and not have the U.S. military going in to make sure that they got that fucking food? Al Jazeera reported that 8 Palestinians tasked with protecting aid trucks were killed by a drone strike on a convoy of aid trucks that were headed to northern Gaza. Of course, because if you're not in one of the concentration camps, they automatically assume that you're Hamas and you're targeted and murdered. Body parts were scattered, and civil defense members had to collect the body parts. Israeli strikes on Thursday included the tank shelling of the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza City, Gaza's sole Catholic church, which killed at least 3 people and wounded several others. Other Israeli attacks on Gaza City killed at least 20 Palestinians. The official death count, according to the health ministry, is now 58,667 since October 7th, 2023. and the number of wounded to another 139,000, almost 140. Studies have found that the ministry's numbers are a significant undercount. It's probably 300,000 or 400,000, if not more, and estimates that factor in indirect deaths caused by the Israeli siege and destruction of all Gaza's civilian infrastructure bring the death toll into the hundreds of thousands. Easily. You're going to have millions killed in the end.
I don't know if you brought Eva's thing on the... I think the same health ministry said that 85% of the population of Gaza is like
stage 5
malnutrition.
I didn't put that out. A bunch of other people did. I have other ones.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's literally, that's the point of no return. There's not much coming back from that, even when you get food later.
That's what they said. You know? Yeah, even like, food doesn't help. That these people are literally going to have organ failures and like the worst.
Yeah, you're gonna have to IV and it's gonna be a mess. So 85%.
But remember that there's a lot more than just Gaza happening, because Israel is also attacking Syria. They're attacking Lebanon. They're attacking the West Bank. So, latest South Syria ceasefire crumbles on July 18th, the day after the 93 were killed. At least 638 killed. They're just fucking murdering everybody, Israel. Bedouins and Druze trade claims of massacres as Israel allows Syria to send troops temporarily. Israel allowed Syria to send troops into southern Syria in order to kill 638 people. Fighting between the Druze and Bedouins in Syria's Sudwaya governorate continues to rage, despite the second ceasefire of the week being declared on Wednesday. The toll in the fighting and killing since Sunday is now up to at least 638, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The fighting started Sunday in the Bedouin neighborhood of Makus, with both sides claiming tit-for-tat kidnappings, eventually leading Druze forces into the area, and the locals called nearby Bedouin tribes. That escalated quickly across the governorate, and now both sides are trading blame for respective massacres in the area, and given the enormous death toll, it's not unlikely that both are accurate. The Bedouins are backed by the Syrian government forces. They were accused to executing Druze several times in the area, while Syrian state media is reporting a large massacre in a hospital by forces loyal to a Druze cleric. The death tolls overall split among hundreds of civilians, hundreds of combatants, and even hundreds of Syrian Defense Ministry forces that got attacked by Israel when trying to enter the region in defiance of Israel's ban on Syria deploying troops to southern Syria. Wait, I'm going to repeat that part of the line because that is just remarkable. Israel is banning Syria deploying troops to southern Syria. Yes, I said that correctly.
Yeah, this has been Israel and the Jilani forces attacking the Druze. You know, it's rough over there right now, especially in Zawaida. You know,
Israel reiterated on Thursday. Israel reiterated on Thursday that the ban remained in place, and Prime Minister Netanyahu bragged that the Wednesday ceasefire was only achieved because of Israeli force. Yeah, from a war criminal, of course. I'm going to believe what they say. Now that the ceasefire seems to be failing, which was the plan the whole time, Israel announced on Friday that it's allowing Syrian troops to go back into the area for 48 hours to try to tamp down the violence. And then what? They're going to start attacking the Syrian troops that were there when you allowed them to be there in the first place because they didn't get out in 48 hours? Syrian troops are said to be redeployed. Whether that's going to actually slow the violence remains to be seen, as the Syrian troops are accused of participating in the summary executions and other violence against the Druze. Fighting and going on outside of the city of Sudwaya in nearby villages, with more and more forces massing on each side. is bad. The Bedouins are reportedly preparing a counterattack against Suwayda itself after seizing several towns and villages on the outskirts. So now you've got balkanization happening within Syria, which was the goal the entire time. So now the Bedouins are claiming some area, the Druze are claiming some area, the Jelani, the Al-Qaeda forces, what HTS are claiming an area, and now you've got smaller regional sects. That's what they want because nobody can then come to a consensus for the country. The death toll is also likely even higher than is being reported by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. One hospital in Suwayda alone claims to have received more than 400 bodies since Monday. The actual toll may not be ultimately known for some time, but one thing is clear, it continues to rise, and this situation is far from resolved. Again, antiwar.com, Indie Media Award honoree. This was Jason Ditz, DITZ. Fuck Israel for that. But we're not done yet. Now, you mentioned Eva Bartlett. I did want to bring an Eva Bartlett story, but it was about a doctor that we have literally been talking about since December when he was abducted.
Yeah.
And Eva has been on this story since day one. I believe she personally knows Dr. Safiya. Israeli army abducted Palestinian doctor Hussam Abu Safiya finally gets a mention in legacy media. And she says NBC issued a not terrible but not great article on the heroic doctor from Gaza. However, they stopped short of detailing his torture, nor the Israeli torture, rape, and murder of 3 doctors from Gaza prior. Of course, they would omit that. Free Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya now. All right. She says if you search for reports on the abduction and torture of Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, they are scant in legacy media, and if mentioned, usually unquestioningly parrot the Israeli lies about his ties to or working for Hamas. Thus, I was surprised this morning to come across the NBC article, not the best by far, but with some truths. More below. For background on the Israeli army's abduction and subsequent torture of Gaza's doctor, see her previous, and here it is. From January, I believe we covered this from RT. So she says, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya is not okay, from his lawyer. My last visit to him was on July 9th, 2025. He's lost over 40 kilograms, more than a third of his body weight. At the time of his arrest, he weighed 100 kilograms. Today, he weighs no more than 60 kilograms.
So do the math, everybody. That's what, 4 months, 5 months? You're dropping 40 kilos.
7 months.
You know? Yeah. At that weight, at 100 kg, that's pretty fucking rough.
On June 24th, he was severely beaten. His room was specifically raided. He was brutally assaulted in the chest area and sustained severe bruises to his face, head, back, and neck. The beating lasted approximately 30 minutes. This is a doctor. He requested medical care, proper testing, and to be examined by a cardiologist, but his request was denied.
Of course it was.
He suffers from irregular heartbeat. His eyeglasses, which had recently been sent to him through his lawyer, were broken. He's still wearing winter clothes while enduring starvation, torture, solitary confinement, and total deprivation, buried underground with no exposure to sunlight. Then she puts some of the June 30th NBC excerpts, quote, before his detention, Abu Safiya, 51, by the way, I'm also 51, who became the head of Kamal Adwan in 2024, probably because they murdered the head of the hospital previously, was the lead physician in Gaza for Med Global, a Chicago-based nonprofit that has partnered with local healthcare workers since 2018 and arranges volunteer missions to the enclave. The organization's co-founder, Dr. John Kaler, told NBC News in a phone interview Thursday that he was very afraid that Abu Safiya won't make it out alive from detention. He added that the physician was a friend of mine, a hero, a mentor, who, among other things, helped to establish nutrition stabilization centers in the Gaza Strip. On his visits to Gaza, Kaler said he had never seen any indication that Abu Safiya was linked with Hamas militant group or any suggestion that it was operating inside the Kamal Adwan hospital. Of course not. 5 other members of Med Global's team have also been detained. And on Monday, the organization called for the release of scores of health workers detained by Israel, including Abu Safiya, which we know they won't do. Their targeting and attacks on the healthcare system is the point. Israeli authorities have repeatedly and blatantly violated international humanitarian law in repeated detentions of and attacks on healthcare workers, it said in a joint letter published on Monday alongside several other organizations. According to Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights, an NGO that advocates for the people of Gaza and that has been providing legal support to Abu Safiya, no formal charges have been made against the hospital director as of Thursday. They're just holding him without charge indefinitely. Asked for an update on his case on Friday, the Israeli military did not immediately respond. What a shock. But a spokesman for the Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights said Thursday that he was still being detained in Ofer prison in the occupied West Bank, where he faced dire conditions, inadequate food, and overcrowded cells. And torture. At least three Palestinian doctors abducted from Gaza have died in Israeli prisons since October 2023. In September of 2024, UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health stated that Dr. Ziad Eldalu is the 3rd doctor confirmed to have died while being detained by Israel. Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, head of the orthopedics department at Al-Shifa Hospital, was, quote, killed under torture at Ofer Detention Center on April 19th of last year. Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh was likely raped to death, wrote UN Special Rapporteur of the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, who deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. Ilyad al-Rantisi was killed due to torture at an Israeli Shin Bet interrogation center in Ashkelon 1 week after his detention in November of 2023. Israeli authorities concealed his death for more than 7 months. Why? They're not going to face any repercussions for it anyway. Why not just announce it? The torture of Palestinians in Israeli prisons has been widely reported. Methods include electric shocks to the genitals, stress positions, psychological torture, near starvation, and rape, resulting in serious internal damage, sometimes leading to death. Collar said his colleague was a heroic physician whose moral compass is directly pointing due north. Thousands of Palestinians are held by Israel under a practice known as administrative detention, which Israeli authorities use to hold people without trial or other usual legal proceedings, often based on alleged secret intelligence and evidence that they don't share with detainees, their families, or legal representatives. Gestapo
often
shit.
Made by AI.
It's Gestapo level stuff. We decided it's so, and we're not going to show you the evidence that shows you so. The practice has been roundly criticized by human rights groups, saying it's used to hold Palestinians indefinitely without charge or due process, while Israel has defended the practice as necessary security measure. In their letter on Monday, Med Global and other organizations said that as of February 2025, at least 185 healthcare workers from Gaza and the West Bank remained in Israeli custody. Their conditions were unknown, it added, let alone the scores that have been murdered by Israel. Many of these released have reported severe abuse, while some died in custody also. She says that the Israeli use
I read somewhere
Go ahead.
That Israel is essentially killing the witnesses to their crimes here. That the medical staff would be the ones to be able to accurately depict the actual horrors on a medical level. That this is what's happening. They're torturing them so that they don't say anything. They're, literally holding them hostage.
So they can't clinically describe what's happening from a medical perspective.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
She says the Israeli use of administrative detention to indefinitely imprison and torture Palestinians, including women and children, isn't controversial. It's outrageous and illegal. If it were one of the U.S. enemy states doing this to just one civilian, legacy media would report on it endlessly, create PR campaigns about it, and definitely not use the term controversial to describe this barbaric practice. And she wrote about this in April of 2024, and more recently, she did one that his wife, Lena, apparently did a recent interview in which she said that he could have joined me in Kazakhstan, but he told me he couldn't abandon his patients or his colleagues. He believed leaving would be a betrayal of his duty. I don't know anything, where he is, if he's alive, if he's okay. I follow the news every day, terrified by what I hear about the conditions of detainees in Israeli prisons. All of these will be linked in the description afterwards at the Substack, because there's just too many to put in the YouTube description. But we're not done there, folks. All right. Again, this is the tweet about his torture
lawyer
from his lawyer, right? And that was one of the last photos we had. That was him getting into the tank, and that was the last photo we had of him being taken in his winter clothes. Now, after hearing all of that, I'm going to play a Caitlin Johnstone couple of minutes because it makes a lot more sense now in context. Caitlin wrote that if you're still supporting Israel in 2025, there's something wrong with you as a person. I'm going to play this, narrated by her husband, Tim.
If you're still supporting Israel in 2025, there's something wrong with you as a person. Sometimes I think it's astonishing how aggressively Israel's supporters work to stomp out criticism of Israel. Then I remember that these people also support mass murdering children. Trying to take away my speech rights is one of their less evil goals. It shouldn't shock me. I saw someone talking online about how crazy it is that music groups who speak out against Israel's atrocities are starting to form alliances with each other in an effort to counteract the campaign to silence them and destroy their careers, saying it shouldn't be necessary to form an alliance in order to oppose an ongoing genocide. And that's true, it shouldn't be necessary. But it also shouldn't surprise us that people who think bombing hospitals is fine would try to cancel musicians for criticizing Israel. One mistake Westerners keep making is thinking of Israel's supporters as normal people with normal moral standards, just because we happen to know them and interact with them in our communities. They look like us, speak like us, dress like us, and act like us, so we assume they must think and feel a lot like us as well. But they don't. If you're still supporting Israel in the year 2025, there's something seriously wrong with you as a person. You do not have a normal, healthy sense of empathy and morality. It's 2025. Israeli soldiers are telling the press that they're being ordered to massacre starving civilians trying to obtain food from aid centers. Countless doctors have been telling the world that Israeli snipers are routinely, deliberately shooting children in the head and chest throughout the Gaza Strip. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and all the leading genocide experts and human rights authorities are saying that a genocide is being perpetrated in Gaza. The New York fucking Times just published an op-ed by a Zionist genocide scholar who's finally admitting that it's a genocide. There is no way to deny what this is anymore. If you still support Israel in the year 2025, it's not because you don't believe Israel is committing horrific atrocities. It's because you believe those horrific atrocities are good and you want to see more of them. Most Israel supporters will deny that this is the case, because they lie. They lie constantly. They have no moral problem with lying. They have no moral problem with burning children alive, so of course they have no problem with lying. That's where people go wrong. They assume Israel supporters can't possibly be lying about their concerns about anti-Semitism in order to promote the information interests of Israel, because nobody could be that evil. But Israel supporters think it's fine to intentionally starve babies by blockading baby formula from entering Gaza. Of course they are that evil. People assume Israel's supporters wouldn't deliberately stage fake anti-Semitic incidents or artificially inflate anti-Semitism figures in their own countries so that their governments will implement authoritarian measures to stomp out criticism of Israel in the name of fighting anti-Semitism, because they assume nobody could be that depraved. But these people think it's fine for the IDF to systematically assassinate Palestinian journalists to stop them from telling the truth. Of course they are that depraved. Of course they'd try to silence our speech. Of course they'd try to send our kids off to war with Iran. Of course they'd work to manipulate our government. Of course they'd pollute the information ecosystem with mountains of lies. They'd support a live-streamed genocide. They're bad people. Supporting Israel and its actions is not some political opinion like your position on property taxes or marijuana legalization. It's not just some people having a point of view we need to respect and treat as equal to our own view on the matter. They are working to make it possible to conduct an extermination campaign of unfathomable horror. That's as political as a gang rape and just as worthy of respect. There's not really anything you can put past Israel's supporters at this point. They will lie. They will manipulate. They will pretend to believe things they do not believe. They will pretend to feel things they do not feel. And they will do these things to facilitate some of the worst atrocities you can possibly imagine. This is who Israel's supporters are. They're showing you who they are every single day.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. Indie Media Award honoree Caitlin Johnstone. Also, you totally user-funded. She takes no sponsorships. She takes no anything other than what people give her for her work. Amazing. Love her. Caitlin John St.O.N.E. So you just spell it all out, Caitlin Johnstone, and put a dot before the last three letters. That's how you get to her URL. Man, and I still got more. I got one more. And this is from Benay Blend over at the Palestine Chronicle, which is Ramzi Baroud's outlet. All right?
Yep.
And this is important because I thought that, you know, they always try to hedge and go to the mainstream media and ask them to cover how come you're not covering it? Well, this is on the need to go beyond asking them to cover to cover Palestinian stories, okay? So, on July 11th, illegal Israeli Jewish settlers murdered 2 Palestinians in the town of Shinjil, north of Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank. 23-year-old Muhammad Shalabi and U.S. citizen Saif Edin Muslat are the latest victims of the Zionist plan to ethnically cleanse all Palestinians from their homeland. Not just Gaza. Remember, people from the West Bank didn't attack anything on October 7th. They had nothing to do with this. And yet they're also being systematically exterminated and displaced. Amid escalating settler attacks across the region. Okay. No, it's just fucking Israelis just attacking the people who live there. Muslat's death drew particular attention, but perhaps because of his U.S. citizenship, as well as his particularly violent death. Murdered while visiting relatives on his family's farm, his relatives attest that settlers beat Muslat, then prevented ambulances from reaching him for several hours. Remember we read the thing about how the drones were preventing people from getting to a woman who was buried under buildings? This tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Zionists also fatally shot his friend, leaving him to bleed out, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Settlers are often depicted as armed and dangerous while somehow being separate from government. In fact, these attacks are occurring under full military protection with political approval from the Zionist regime. Shortly after the news broke of the tragedy, activist circles took to social media and beyond to lament that that most mainstream media had ignored this tragedy, while at best only giving it a few lines. Actually, New York Times reporters Aaron Boxerman reported from Jerusalem and Fatima Abdul Karim from Ramallah did cover the incident, but unfortunately with the usual slant notable in such articles by the Times. You know, he happened to have died, not that he was brutally beaten by Israelis. The very title reeks of so-called two-sidesism, meaning that reporters treated violence committed by both sides as somehow equally violent and regrettable. Seemingly a reversal of Trump's infamous defense of white nationalists during their participation in a 2017 rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, not North Carolina. Very fine people on both sides, he said. The Times referred to rock throwing on part of the Palestinians against the armed settlers with lethal weapons as a clash. Perhaps this bias happens because very often Western media rely mostly on Israeli sources, thus refusing to seek out other witnesses for their story. Hence, the coverage comes out this way. Mohammed Shalabi, 23, was shot and killed during the clashes, according to Palestinian health officials. It was not immediately clear who shot him. Both armed settlers and Israeli forces were on the scene. In the case of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was shot in the back of the head by an Israeli soldier, Israel at first, remember, denied knowing the cause of her death, then claimed it wasn't intentional on part of the shooter. That was one of the incidents that radicalized me permanently against Israel, honestly. The way that they treated her and then treated her funeral was one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen in my life. The Israeli military said in a statement that the violence began on Friday when Palestinians hurled stones at Israeli civilians, lightly injuring two of them. The Times article continues. Violence has soared in the West Bank since the start of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. You mean almost 2 years ago? Israel has increased the violence because Palestinians have not ramped up their attacks on Israelis in that time, because that would give the Israelis an excuse to destroy the entire area. Thus, there is no context given for Palestinian resistance, in this case, in the form of stone throwing, no mention of the Nakba of 1948, when Israeli violence towards the indigenous population actually began. And even before 1948, when the terrorism had started happening in other Arab nations of Jews to force them and lead them to believe, brainwash them into believing that the only safe place for them to be would be in Palestine, aka Israel. There's the same lack of framework pertaining to the entity's genocide in Gaza, a siege, not a war, on the total population, not just Hamas, all done in the hopes of displacing inhabitants of the entire strip, which they're doing. Although there's some testimony given by Palestinian witnesses later in the article, it focuses solely on extremist Israeli settlers who are assumed to be acting on their own. As Aaron Turgeman wrote in 2015, again, remember, this did not start October 7th, the game of blame the hand, which is the settlers, has been played since the days of early militant Zionism. A move which allows the entity to carry on its colonization project with impunity, but in reality, it's the case that the hand does not operate by itself. It's the head that moves the hand, and the head is the Israeli government, representing Israel's Jewish population. You know, that reminds me, and I recall back to when we watched Issa Amro. He has the video of the settlers attacking his place and threatening to set fire to his trees and throwing rocks at his house. And again, that's blame the settlers? No, there were IDF soldiers standing between the settlers and Issa. He couldn't respond or he'd be killed by the IDF. That's hand with the head approving. Recalling an earlier incident, the Times article concludes with a recap of another Palestinian American boy who was murdered at the hands of Israeli forces, You covered this with Colin on INN News. Colin was really upset about this. All right.
Yeah.
In April, Amir Rabi, a 14-year-old boy from Paterson, New Jersey, died after Zionist soldiers shot him 11 times. The justification? Times reporters conclude in a chillingly straightforward manner, the Israeli military said he'd thrown stones, labeling him as a terrorist. Apparently, his family disagreed, but still the reporters gave no hint that perhaps death by 11 bullets is not a fitting penalty for throwing stones. There's no collective punishment or, proportional response type of measurement here being held to account. Writing for Palestine Chronicle, South African journalist Iqbal Jassad asks, has slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza become normalized? Well, we remember that guy on Israeli TV saying they kill 100 people a day in Gaza and nobody cares. Judging by articles that don't question the legality of extrajudicial killings, not just in Gaza, but in all of occupied Palestine, the answer must be yes. Zionism has always relied on the support of Western powers, and that support relies on the projection of image. Western journalists buy into this ploy by repeating the regime's refusal to take responsibility for any of its crimes. Nevertheless, there are choices that extend beyond the mainstream. In A New Generation Bears Witness, Ramzi Baroud, founder of Palestine Chronicle, describes an emerging group of young journalists in Gaza whose mission is to cut through the myths propagated by Western media, the ones that haven't already been killed. Over 200 have been. For example, compare how these journalists cover this story with the ways that mainstream platforms report the news. As for the latter, there was no context, no effort to question information provided by the Zionist regime, who lies constantly and has been caught lying constantly. Although there might be a few comments from Palestinian observers, these are mentioned so briefly that they carry very little weight. Palestinian reporters, along with those sympathetic to their cause, provide context and a backstory that makes clear how this was no random act. According to Palestine Chronicle staff, the murder of Shalabi and Muslat occurred amid an escalation of settler and military violence along the central and northern West Bank. Again, not Gaza. No Hamas in the West Bank. Israel's genocide in Gaza, now in its 10th month, also provides a backdrop for this story. I would say it's much more than its 10th month, but it's now in its 20th month, I think. Lebanese pan-Arabist source Al-Mayadeen explained further that these attacks are part of the entity's ongoing efforts to occupy more Palestinian territory. Every day they move the line a little further in, a little further in. Now they just declared an entire zone in one of the three areas that the people now need to clear out of that too, and that's where their freshwater desalination plant is, and a bunch of other important stuff too. In response to this new wave of Israeli aggression in Gaza and across the West Bank, Palestinian filmmakers are proving that art imitates life, and sometimes vice versa. More importantly, these films provide another lens through which to counter Israeli Hezbollah. For instance, Watermelon Pictures offers a wide variety of films that depict, through documentary and fiction, the lives of contemporary Palestinians who resist Israeli theft of land and lives. Included on their website, Farah Nablusi's The Teacher follows a charismatic instructor, Bassem, whose son died from neglect while detained in an Israeli prison. To compensate, he takes two young men under his wing. After the oldest is shot by a settler who seems determined to burn his family's trees, Bassem takes the culprit to court, but his efforts are in vain because there's no justice for Palestinians under occupation. In this case, art foreshadows life, as Nablusi wrote the film script several years ago, only to have it released last year. Still, the only change for Palestinians is the escalation of violence that's been directed against them since the Nakba, an event funded by Western governments but ignored and or misreported by the media. Given their reluctance to report anything other than the official story, it's not enough to ask that mainstream news cover these stories from Palestine. Given their unqualified reliance on Zionist narratives, it is perhaps best that they don't. Because they'll just misrepresent it, whitewash it, and water it down. On the other hand, there's an abundance of credible sources that provide context for these tragic stories. Mondoweiss, which we brought earlier. Al-Mayadeen, which we cover often. Palestine Chronicle, here. The Electronic Intifada. Resistance News Network on Telegram. These platforms and more rely on narratives told through various indigenous lenses. Quote, despite the devastation in Gaza, a new understanding of the tragic realities there and throughout Palestine is emerging, Baroud writes. These lessons will endure. A key lesson is that Palestinians, like other victims of conflict and colonialism, are not inherently dependent on the West for their truths to be known and acknowledged. Again, shout out to Reef and Colin for bringing those stories to INN News. For those looking for credible narratives and backstory, it's time to break their dependence too on official news. Again, abandon corporate media and encourage your family to do so wherever possible. They are lying, paid propagandists on behalf of the Zionist regime. This is yet another example of that they do so.
Yeah.
So, fuck Israel. Fuck Israel. And once again, fuck Israel. Because they're murdering, lying scumbags who are stealing land and genociding a population while denying that they're doing it the entire time. It's as disgusting and gaslighting as anything. And they're doing it in the name of religion, which is even more disgusting. YouTube certainly doesn't like us talking about stuff like that. So if you're able to, and it means, please support the network with a tip somewhere else other than on YouTube. The best ways to do that are at Cash App, $ Indie News Network. Cash App, it's an app on your phone. ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Kameshwari Kate did that earlier today. You've got paypal.me/Indie News Network. You've got our website at indienewsnow.com. And then we've got the Substacks at innnewsletter.com. And then at indiemediatoday.com, which is where we are live right now. So you can actually go and watch us at indiemediatoday.com. And by the way, subscribe to indiemediatoday.com if you're not already doing so. All the clips from this get emailed out. I emailed out another tech tips video. We're going to show that. I'll at least show you what it looks like later on. I love you all, and I thank you for being here. Y'all are the best. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. And we'll see you soon, fam.
We'll see you in a bit.
Mwah. Ciao, baby. Bye, Felicia.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
You can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 died? And now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison.